Hey guys, today we open a door. Most people never walk through, not because it's locked, but because they don't know it exists. Right now, you're standing in front of it, and the moment you take even a step forward, so your life begins to shift, not from luck, not from chance, but from law. The law of money isn't a trick, a trend, or a tactic. It's a deeper force that starts within you and extends outward into everything you touch. You were taught, maybe without words, that money came from the outside, from bosses, markets, handouts, or timing. You were told it was unstable. Some people had it, some didn't. Some were born into wealth. Others had to claw their way up. But inside you, deeper than that story, was always a quiet truth. That wealth has a pattern, that it follows order, that it responds to inner causes, not outer chaos. You feel that now, not just as a thought, but as a recognition. A sense that maybe, all along, the external chase has been backwards. That instead of running harder, you're meant to turn inward. Instead of hoping, you're meant to learn. And that's what you're doing here. The law of money begins not with how you earn, or save, or invest, but with how you think, how you move, how you carry belief. Because money, like water, flows downhill, and the slope is built by your internal posture, your discipline, your clarity, your trust in direction. Change that, and you change what flows to you. So you stop, you breathe, you listen in. There's no magic here, no lightning bolt of instant riches, but there is law, predictable, consistent, almost boring, until it starts to work. That's when you'll see. Boring builds empires, consistency builds confidence, and clarity builds cash flow. You're not waiting for motivation anymore. You're learning alignment. You start with observation. You ask, what do I believe about wealth? You let the answers come without judgment. I think it's hard to get. I feel guilty wanting more. I don't think I'm the kind of person who ever makes real money. Good. Now it's on the table. Now you can begin. Because the law doesn't respond to how much you want. It responds to how much you're aligned. You could shout your goals to the sky every morning, but if you're still operating from fear, from lack, from proving yourself to someone else, it won't hold us. Results will slip through. But the moment your inside matches your outside, the moment your beliefs, your choices, and your actions lock into place, the flow begins. You no longer need to chase the storm. You learn to become the cloud. So you make a decision, not just to earn more, but to become more. To become someone wealth moves towards. Someone the law recognizes. That starts with integrity. With the smallest decisions, you keep promises. You finish what you start. You tell the truth, not because it's nice, but because it's structural. Integrity is gravity. Without it, your goals float aimlessly. With it, they pull resources towards you. You don't get perfect, you get intentional. You start noticing, where am I out of alignment? Where do I say I value growth, but choose comfort? Where do I say I want success, but act like a victim? These aren't flaws. They're signals. And now you're listening. The law of money doesn't reward personality. It rewards pattern, consistency of thought, clarity of direction, discipline in action. That's what you're learning to build. It starts to show up in small ways. You stop skipping the uncomfortable tasks. You start replying to emails with purpose. You stop checking your phone every 5 minutes. Not because someone told you to, but because you're becoming someone who respects time, energy, and focus. Those are currencies too. Treat them well, and financial currency follows. You begin to feel different in your space. You stand straighter. You speak more directly. You don't apologize for your goals. You don't ask for permission to improve. You realize wealth doesn't require explanation. It requires embodiment. You stop idolizing results. You start honoring systems. You don't need fireworks. You need a furnace, a process that burns steadily, day by day, regardless of mood or outcome. That's where the real power lives. The law doesn't care how excited you are. It cares how consistent you are. The difference between a wish and a result is how many quiet days you keep showing up after it stops feeling exciting. That's where the shift happens. Not in the moment of the dream, but in the moment you refuse to quit. And yes, some people will look at your new focus and not understand. That's okay. You're not here for approval. You're here for alignment. When you start to act from that place, you'll see how fast the world begins to mirror it. Clients respond, opportunities open, mentors appear. Not because you begged, but because you became someone they could trust. You realize money doesn't move toward noise. It moves toward structure, toward people who respect value, time, and flow. That's you now. And when doubt creeps in, and it will, you don't panic. You return to the law, to your posture, to your next small act of order. You make your bed. You open your laptop. You study the thing you said you'd master. These moments don't look like wealth, but they are the roots of it. You're not fighting anymore. You're aligning. You let this idea settle in your body. I am governed by law, not luck. My effort matters. My focus matters. My direction matters. That's not delusion. That's design. And as this idea takes hold, you realize you're not alone. Others are walking this path, quietly, steadily, building from the inside out, not chasing, but attracting, not forcing, but forming. You're becoming one of them. And now, with the inner law awake, we move, not wildly, not randomly, but forward, with clarity. Your next step is to understand that every single action you take, every choice, every word, every move echoes back to you, and learning how to direct that echo is the second law. You begin to understand something few people ever truly grasp. Nothing you do is wasted. Every action you take, no matter how small, sends out a ripple. And that ripple doesn't just disappear into the air. It moves outward. It reflects. It finds its way back. That's the second law. Action is an echo. And wealth, real wealth, starts to gather when you become deliberate about the echoes you send. You've heard the phrase, "What goes around comes around." But this isn't karma in the mystical sense. It's structure. It's rhythm. You give effort. You get movement. You offer value. You earn trust. You commit. And life slowly bends in your direction. Not because it owes you, but because you've built the conditions for return. The problem is, most people act without awareness. They speak in frustration. They scroll in boredom. They delay what matters and expect miracles. And when nothing comes back, they say, "See, nothing works." But that's not truth. That's noise. They never sent a clear signal in the first place. You're not making that mistake anymore. You're waking up to the truth that your behavior is a form of wealth communication. When you show up on time, you're saying, "Oh, I'm ready." When you follow through on your word, you're saying, "I can be trusted." When you give attention, effort, service, value, you are planting seeds, and every seed has a return. You don't always see it immediately, but that doesn't mean it's gone. You're building a life where cause and effect aren't things you read in a book. They're things you feel in your body. You begin noticing what echoes you've been sending all along. When you cut corners, what comes back is instability. When you complain, what comes back is resistance. When you procrastinate, what comes back is pressure, not punishment, just feedback. And now you're ready to listen. You take your power back in small ways. You respond to a message you've been avoiding. You clean your desk before starting work. You stop saying, "I'll try," and start saying, "I will." These sound like tiny moves, but they're not. They're echo correction. They're the start of a new signal. You no longer act from reaction. You act from intention. You stop letting your feelings dictate your follow-through because you realize this law doesn't care how you feel. It cares what you do. And when you do what matters, consistently, deliberately, cleanly, you become someone whose echo builds wealth instead of leaking it. You build something stronger than motivation. You build integrity in motion. You think about the way sound works. You shout into a canyon. And what you hear back depends on what you put out. Sharp words return sharply. Calm words return calmly. Wealth is the same. You don't earn respect by demanding it. You earn it by echo, by repetition, by rhythm. So you set a rhythm that serves you. You stop treating actions like one-time events. You see them as deposits. Each day, each task, each conversation, it's a deposit into your field, and your field compounds. You don't need immediate payoff. You need consistency. That's the engine now. People will watch your rhythm, not what you say, not what you post, but what you actually do over time. And the world rewards rhythm far more than ambition. Ambition is loud and short-lived. Rhythm is quiet and undeniable. You're choosing undeniable. You pay attention to the way you enter rooms, not to impress, but to carry steadiness. You greet people with warmth. You listen without interruption. You leave things better than you found them. These are wealth actions. They don't show up on a spreadsheet, but they show up in reputation, in opportunity, in how doors open when you're not looking. You begin seeing time differently, not as something you kill, but as something you invest. 30 minutes of learning, 15 minutes of outreach, 1 hour of focused work without distraction. These are not tasks. These are leverage. They don't just build knowledge or results. They amplify your signal. They raise the quality of what comes back. Even rest becomes strategic, not as escape, but as recovery. You don't binge and just to forget your day. You rest so your echo can reset. You walk, you breathe, you go quiet, not to vanish, but to listen, to feel what the day is reflecting back, and then you adjust. You're building a life that answers itself. You become someone people trust without needing to check. You say you'll do it, and you do, not to earn praise, but because that's who you are now. Someone whose actions align with words. Someone who moves forward when others pause. Someone whose echo returns steady and clear, and the results will come. Not always where you expect. Not always from who you think, but they'll arrive. Because when you keep planting and watering and pruning, you get harvest. That's not magic. That's law. You start to respect the lag. You understand? The gap between action and result is not failure. It's process. And while others panic in the gap, you stay calm. You know what you sent. You know what's coming. You don't chase. You prepare to receive. This is the posture of wealth. Not desperate, but deliberate. And yes, sometimes you'll slip. You'll say the wrong thing. You'll miss the mark. You'll forget the law and react from habit. That's okay. You don't spiral. You repair the echo. You apologize. You reset. You get back in rhythm. That's the power of awareness. You start to feel more grounded, even in uncertainty. Because you know, I don't need to control the world. I just need to control what I send into it. That's enough. You close this chapter with a quiet decision. From now on, everything you do carries signal. So you move with clarity, with direction, with belief. Not waiting for results, but sending the kind of action that makes results inevitable. And once you've learned to echo clearly, you're ready to shape what the signal actually contains. Not just your behavior, but your inner image. Because the world doesn't just reflect your actions, it reflects your identity. That's the next law. You realize now, clarity is the real starting point. Not hustle, not pressure, not chasing everything at once, just a clean, focused purpose that gives shape to everything you do. It's easy to fall into the trap of scattering your energy. You want more money, so you say yes to everything. Every opportunity, every idea, every offer. You try to build 5 bridges at once, and none of them ever reach the other side. That's not ambition. That's confusion. And confusion leaks your power. So you pause, you zoom out, you ask yourself one question that changes everything. What do I really want to build? Not what sounds impressive, not what others expect, not what worked for someone else on the internet. Just one honest answer, one aim that belongs to you. When that answer comes, whether it's freedom, impact, stability, or growth, you don't rush, you sit with it, you give it room, you let it settle into your nervous system until it becomes a direction, not just a wish. And now, everything starts to shift because focused purpose isn't about intensity. It's about alignment. It's about stacking your choices, your time, your learning, your energy toward a single aim instead of letting them pull you in 50 directions. You stop measuring your days by how much you did. You start measuring by how deeply you moved in one direction. You don't need 5 side hustles. You need one path walked with commitment. You don't need to master 10 skills at once. You need to become excellent at what moves your purpose forward. That's it. And when the world gets loud, and it will, you return to that purpose like a compass. You ask, does this serve what I'm building, or does it distract? And if it distracts, you let it go, without guilt, without fear of missing out, because you're no longer chasing every wave. You're sailing a route you've chosen. That decision alone saves you years. Focused purpose becomes your filter. A client opportunity arises. You don't just ask, how much does it pay? You ask, does it move me toward my bigger aim? A new idea pops into your mind. You don't dive in instantly. You measure it against your purpose. If it fits, you act. If it doesn't, you leave it. No drama, just clarity. You begin to notice how much time you used to lose to indecision, to trying to do too much. Now, every yes is cleaner. Every no is firmer. You feel less rushed, more rooted. You're not just busy, you're building. And the world responds. Because people trust someone who knows where they're going. Clients feel safer. Partners become clearer. Your message sharpens. And so does your presence. Focused purpose makes you magnetic, not by force, but by direction. You also become more resilient. Because even when results take time, you don't panic. You don't abandon your path after one slow week or a single piece of bad news. You know why you're here, and that's enough. Purpose gives you stamina. Purpose lets you rest without quitting. Purpose keeps you moving when the surface looks still. You begin to treat your purpose like a garden. You water it daily. Some days the sun is out, some days it rains, but you keep showing up. And over time, that quiet care builds something deep, something rooted, something real. You no longer envy other people's success because you're no longer drifting. You know what you're doing. You're building your lane. And you trust your lane. Even your routines shift. You wake up not just to check messages or survive the day. You wake up with a mission. You train your focus like a muscle. You protect it from distraction. Not out of fear, but out of respect. And that respect spills into everything. You no longer let random thoughts steer you. You redirect them. You no longer jump between projects hoping one will work. You refine what's working and build from there. Your days begin to feel smoother, sharper, stronger. You're not in a rush. You're in rhythm. And the more you walk your purpose, the less you need to prove. You don't need to be loud. You don't need to convince people you're valuable. You're too busy being valuable, deliberately, consistently, purposefully. Your purpose becomes a quiet fire. You don't show it off. You live it. You stop asking, "Is this working?" and start asking, "Am I still aligned?" Because when alignment is right, results take care of themselves. And when confusion creeps in, you don't panic. You return to the original aim, to the reason you started. You write it down again. You speak it out loud. You remember, "I chose this. I am building this." And that memory clears the fog. You don't need to feel motivated every day. You need to remember your purpose every day. That's the deeper fuel. That's what keeps you steady when momentum fades. That's what gets you back on track when the world tilts sideways. Purpose is not a mood. It's a foundation. You hold that foundation now, and you let it shape your schedule, your strategy, your state of mind. You stop chasing distractions masked as opportunity. You stop saying yes to things that dilute your energy. You stop comparing your chapter 2 to someone else's chapter 20. You walk, you trust, you continue. Because focused purpose isn't just a personal tool, it's a wealth law. And obeying it brings returns in every part of your life. Money, peace, confidence, time. You end this chapter not with a sprint, but with direction. The path is clear, the distractions are fading, and ahead of you is space, wide, open space, to build something that lasts. You've set your purpose, the path is clear. But clarity alone doesn't carry you forward. Now comes the force behind it, the silent engine that separates wish from achievement. Your will. Will is not about being loud or aggressive. It's not about force in the traditional sense. It's quieter than that, sharper. Will is the invisible choice you make every time you want to quit, but don't. Every time you feel tired, bored, or discouraged, and still show up. That's not discipline alone. That's will. And wealth answers to it. People talk about talent, luck, opportunity. But few talk about will because it can't be bought or taught in a weekend course. Will is something you shape by doing hard things when no one's watching. Will is forged in silence, and you're building it now. You begin with small acts. You finish the task you said you would, even though no one's checking. You get up when the alarm goes off, even when you don't feel like it. You hit send on the email you've been avoiding. These are not random efforts. These are decisions that build your internal momentum. Will is like a muscle. You don't need to be born with it. You build it through reps. Most people quit too soon, not because they don't have dreams, but because they never train their will to keep them moving when it gets uncomfortable. They start a project, a goal, a new idea, and the moment it gets slow, they drift. They think maybe it wasn't meant to be, but that's not truth. That's habit, and habit can be replaced with will. You begin to see resistance as a signal, not to stop, but to lean in. You feel the urge to procrastinate, and instead of giving in, you smile. You say, "This is the moment I build my will." You open the file, You take the first step, you break the stall. That's how momentum begins, not with a perfect plan, but with a single act of defiance against your own hesitation. Will makes you dangerous, not in a harmful way, but in a focused way. Because once you trust your ability to follow through, you become unstoppable. You don't need guarantees. You don't need permission. You need only time, and you know how to use it. This is where the game changes. You stop asking, "Do I feel like it?" You start asking, "What did I decide?" And that single shift turns scattered effort into consistent output. While others chase motivation, you build systems. While others wait for a spark, you show up and strike the match. Will is not dramatic, it's durable. It's the part of you that keeps showing up long after the excitement fades. It's what pushes through the middle, the long, quiet stretch between the start and the payoff. And it's in that middle where wealth is actually made. You start finding joy in it, not because it's easy, but because it's yours. You feel yourself growing stronger every time you act without needing the rush of applause. Every time you keep going, when it's just you and the work. No noise, no crowd. Just focus. You train yourself to get better at being bored. Because the truth is, mastery isn't always exciting. Some of the most valuable actions feel repetitive. The writing, the planning, the systems, the calls. But you do them anyway. Not because they thrill you, but because they build you. And what keeps you steady. It makes you dependable to others, yes, but more importantly, to yourself. You start to trust your own word. You say you'll do it, and you do, not out of pressure, out of power. That internal alignment becomes a kind of freedom. You don't second-guess your ability to follow through. You know who you are now. Even your setbacks shift in meaning. You don't see failure as a wall. You see it as part of the training, a detour, not a dead end, a chance to reinforce your commitment. You don't need a perfect track record to succeed. You need a consistent return to the path. And that's what your will gives you. People ask, "How do I stay motivated?" And you answer, quietly, internally, "I don't." You stay willing. You stay aligned. You move anyway. Because your purpose is worth it. You stop outsourcing your momentum to circumstances. You create your own spark. You build your own push. You stop waiting for the mood. You start moving your body, your focus, your schedule in the direction you've chosen. You become someone who finishes. And that reputation, both to the world and to yourself, starts unlocking things. People respond to reliability. Clients come back. Partners lean in, or resources gather. Not because you chased them, but because your consistency drew them in. You realize talent is optional, but will is non-negotiable. And the more you walk in, the less resistance you feel. Not because things are easier, but because you've grown stronger. Your threshold has expanded. What once felt hard is now just part of the day. You don't flinch. You move forward. And when others admire your results, you'll know they weren't built on luck. They were built on will. You end this chapter with your head high, not from pride, but from power. Quiet, steady power. The kind that keeps going. The kind that builds wealth, not once, but over and over again. Because the world doesn't just reward talent. It rewards those who stay in the game long enough to win. And the next step is learning how to trust that rhythm. How to stay consistent without burning out. How to balance effort with belief. That's the next law. Something has shifted in you. You've shown up. You've acted. You've stayed on the path when it was easier to walk away. And now something quiet begins to rise from that pattern. Not noise, not ego, but confidence. Real, earned, rooted confidence. Confidence is not a costume you wear. It's not a speech you memorize or power pose in front of a mirror. True confidence isn't built by pretending. It's built by pattern. By keeping your word, by making small promises to yourself and keeping them. Each time you follow through, you're stacking a quiet proof inside yourself. I do what I say. I am who I claim to be. Confidence is a currency, and the world trades in it every day. When you carry real confidence, people respond without even realizing why. They sense it in your presence, in your tone, in your pace. You don't need to oversell. You don't need to rush. Confidence creates space, and space creates wealth. But here's the secret. The world cannot give you what you have not given yourself. You can't beg others to believe in you if you haven't done the reps. You can't sell your vision if you haven't first lived it. Even in small pieces, people buy into your certainty, not your product, not your script, not your pitch. And certainty comes from seeing who you become when things get hard. You've seen it now. You've felt what it's like to push through discomfort, to act without applause, to move when no one else believed it mattered. And that's exactly why you can now begin to trust yourself on a different level. That trust shows, and others can feel it. Confidence gives you permission. You no longer wait for perfect timing. You no longer delay action until you've read one more book or taken one more course. You realize the knowledge gap is smaller than you think. The real gap is belief. You close that gap with motion. You start saying yes to opportunity, to risk, to responsibility. Not recklessly, but with posture, with clarity, with a spine that didn't come from shortcuts, but from repetition. Confidence is not volume. It's weight. It's the steady tone in your voice when you speak from real experience. It's the eye contact you hold because you're not hiding anything. It's the pace you walk, not rushing, not stalling, just moving forward with purpose. People confuse confidence with arrogance, but confidence doesn't shout. It anchors. It's not about proving you're better. It's about knowing you're enough, not because of titles, but because of alignment. You start seeing how others operate. You notice when someone's words don't match their energy. You spot overcompensation. You feel when someone's selling from a place of doubt. You don't judge them. You just understand now. You've been there, and you've stepped through it. And when you speak now, whether in a meeting, a pitch, a casual conversation, your words carry something different. Not more flash, more substance, more lived in truth. Because confidence isn't about being right. It's about being real. And the more you act from that place, the more results begin to meet you. Because the world flows toward clarity, toward self-trust, toward people who don't just want it, but know how to handle it. You don't shrink anymore. When opportunity knocks, you open the door. Even if your hands shake a little, even if your voice trembles the first time, you step in. Because confidence is built in motion, not in waiting rooms. You start making decisions faster, not impulsively, but with trust. You don't need 100 opinions to validate your next step. You know the data, yes. But more than that, you know yourself. And that speeds everything up. Even your mistakes change shape. You no longer fear them. You extract lessons. You refine. You don't crumble, you calibrate. That's confidence, not two. And you give others permission to rise. Because when you carry grounded confidence, it's contagious. People feel safer. They open up. They mirror your clarity. That's not manipulation. That's leadership. And leadership builds wealth, not just in money, but in trust, in reach, in reputation. you become someone others remember. Not because you were the loudest, but because you were the clearest. Because you walked in your word, and you begin to feel lighter, less burdened by what ifs, more present, more grounded, because confidence is freedom. It unhooks you from the need to constantly chase, explain, or impress. You know what you're building. You know why it matters. And you know you can carry it forward. You don't need to feel amazing every moment. You just need to feel steady enough to take the next step. And that step leads you somewhere deeper, not just into belief, but into resilience, into the unshakable part of you that knows how to stand, no matter the weather. Because once you believe in your direction, and once you trust your ability to walk it, the only thing left is to keep going. That's where we go next. Now that you believe, now that you trust your path, there's only one thing left to do. Keep walking. This is the law of persistence. The point where most people stop. Not because they weren't smart, not because they didn't want it, but because they thought results should arrive faster, louder, easier. And when they didn't, they gave up. You don't do that anymore. You understand now. Real results take time and rhythm, not just bursts of energy, but the quiet, repeated steps that nobody claps for. Because persistence isn't heroic, it's habitual. You wake up and you go again. Maybe you didn't sleep great. Maybe yesterday was rough. Maybe you're not sure if this next move will work. Still, you go. You show up, you make the call, you write the page, you do the reps. That's wealth behavior. You're not addicted to outcomes. You're devoted to process. You don't chase wins. You stack efforts over time, over weeks, over seasons, because you know that most people quit in the dip. But you train for the dip. You've learned the difference between failure and fatigue. Fatigue whispers, rest a little. Failure screams, you'll never make it. You don't listen to the scream, you listen to your rhythm. And sometimes rhythm says, walk slow, but always keep walking. This is what builds the foundation most never reach. Not the perfect strategy, not the flawless launch, but the quiet decision, repeated daily. I continue. And it's not just blind effort, it's intelligent persistence. You don't keep doing what's not working. You adapt, you refine, you test, you learn. You keep moving, not in circles, but in progress. That's the difference. You stop measuring your worth by today's feedback. You stop quitting because the likes were low or the sales didn't spike. You remember? Real results are delayed by design. The work you do today, it'll show up weeks or months from now, and that's okay. You get more patient, but not passive. You don't sit around hoping. You stay in motion. Small motion is still motion. A message, a journal entry, a brainstorm, a conversation. They compound, and you let them. You begin to love the walk itself, not because every day is perfect, but because you're no longer trying to escape it. You're no longer working in a panic to reach some finish line that doesn't exist. You're building, you're shaping, you're becoming. Persistence is not a grind, it's a groove. And once you find your groove, you stop needing to prove. You stop starting over. You stop questioning your every move. You walk, you adjust, you keep going, and the world starts responding differently. Because people respect consistency. Clients trust it. Partners rely on it. Your reputation is no longer based on a single moment. It's built on repetition. You don't have to chase credibility. You create it, one step at a time. You also stop fearing slow seasons. You know they'll come, but you don't let them break your stride. Because you've been here before. You've built this rhythm. You know how to keep going. even through doubt, even through silence, this is your edge now. Because the truth is, most people aren't outworked. They're outlasted. They could have won. If they just stayed in the game, you're staying, not because it's easy, but because you're ready. Because you've chosen this lane. Because you've cleaned your purpose, trained your will, earned your confidence. And now you're walking like someone who means it. And each step you take reinforces the next. You don't have to feel perfect. You just have to keep placing one foot after the other. You stop looking at how far you have to go and start recognizing how far you've already come. You've outlived the version of you that used to quit. You don't sabotage your momentum anymore. You protect it. You don't start over every Monday. You start once and stay. Not without slips, but without surrender. Because persistence isn't about never falling. It's about how quickly you rise. And you rise faster now. You catch yourself earlier. You course correct with less drama. You don't drown in bad days. You move through them. You learn from them. You let them go. And you go again. That's how you build real stamina. That's how you turn effort into endurance. And that's how you make wealth not just possible, but inevitable. You start to believe it now, not just intellectually, but in your bones. If I keep walking, I get there. And if I keep walking, I grow. If I keep walking, I win. And you will. Because now you're not relying on bursts of inspiration. You're powered by something far more stable. Decision. The decision to continue. And once you've mastered that, once you've become someone who doesn't quit, you're ready for the next law. The inner shift that magnetizes opportunity. It's time to talk about attraction. Now that you walk with persistence, now that your steps are aligned and steady, you begin to notice something new. Opportunity starts to find you, not randomly, not out of luck, but because of a deeper law now unfolding. You attract what you are. It's not about vision boards or magic chants. It's not about wishing something into your life. Attraction is mirror energy. What you project consistently, what you embody daily, that's what echoes back in the form of people, offers, ideas, and breakthroughs. When you carry clarity, you attract clarity. When you walk with integrity, you draw partners who match it. When you speak with value, opportunities come looking for you, not because you chased them, but because you created a signal strong enough for them to find you. Most people try to manipulate attraction. They tweak the surface. New profile photo, new pitch, new offer, but they haven't changed the signal. They're still full of doubt, distraction, inconsistency, and that's what they attract. More noise, more rejection, more confusion. But you're different now. You've started living as the version of you that matches the future you want. You're no longer trying to get things. You're learning how to align with them. You attract abundance by becoming someone who acts like abundance is already part of your life. Calm, confident, generous, present, not tight, reactive, or desperate. You move with the quiet authority of someone who's already enough, not someone begging to be chosen. And people feel that difference. It's subtle, but it's powerful. They don't know why they're drawn to you, why your emails land, why your presence makes them pay attention. But the reason is this: you're not reaching out from need. You're reaching out from value. You've already become the thing they want to be around. You're no longer chasing wealth. You're creating a field where wealth can land. Think of it like a garden. You don't attract butterflies by chasing them. You build the environment they're drawn to. The flowers, the stillness, the color, the scent. That's how attraction works. And your life is no different. You don't have to beg for attention. You simply become more visible by becoming more aligned. You say what you mean. You keep your promises. You stay consistent. You refine your craft. That's the signal. And the more you refine your signal, the less noise you encounter. Wrong people stop showing up. Irrelevant distractions fall away. Because your clarity no longer matches their frequency. You've tuned out of the chaotic channel and into one of purpose, power, and peace. And on that channel, opportunity flows. You start seeing it everywhere, in a message you might have ignored before, in a casual connection that now leads to something real, in the idea that pops into your mind during a quiet moment. This isn't coincidence. It's the natural response of a world tuned to reflection. You attract not what you want, but what you embody. So when you want something new, you don't ask, "How do I get that?" You ask, "Who do I need to become for that to make sense in my life?" You want wealth? Become someone who respects time, who manages money with intention, who shows up with value. You want loyal clients? Become someone worth trusting, someone who delivers, listens, improves. You want peace? Become someone who protects their boundaries and moves from clarity. This is the inside-out law of attraction. It's not magic, it's mechanics. And now, you're playing the long game. You stop obsessing over when it shows up. You start focusing on who you are while you wait. You show up like someone who deserves the result, even before it arrives. And in doing so, you speed it up. Because when the external finally meets the internal, you don't just attract the opportunity, you're ready for it. You don't fumble the bag. You carry it with grace. Attraction isn't passive, it's powerful. But it only works when the inner foundation is steady. That's why you've spent the last 6 chapters building it. Now, you're not just hoping, you're drawing. You're not just pushing, you're pulling. And you understand, the most powerful magnet is a stable identity. So you protect that identity. You stop reacting emotionally to every high and low. You stop shape-shifting to fit rooms you've outgrown. You don't chase energy. You radiate it. You don't beg to be seen. You move like someone who already knows their place, and the world sees you differently now. Because you're different now. You've stepped into the version of yourself that no longer needs permission. You are the permission. You no longer try to fit in. You're too busy building something worth being part of. You no longer ask if you're worthy. You've proven it through action. This is the turning point, where everything slows down, but strengthens. Where you stop sprinting after success and start attracting it by alignment. And as the outside world begins to mirror the inside work, you realize wealth is not something you achieve. It's something you tune into. And in the next law, you'll learn how to clear the noise that blocks your signal. So attraction becomes even stronger. Now that you're aligned, now that your energy draws the right things toward you, it's time to remove what blocks the signal. Noise. Noise isn't always loud. Sometimes it's invisible, but it clouds your mind, distracts your focus, and weakens your direction. It's time to clear it. Clearing the noise is about space. Mental space, emotional space, physical space. Space to think clearly, act cleanly, and receive fully. Because attraction works best when you're not distracted. And wealth flows best where there's room. You start by noticing what clutters you. What do you carry out of habit that no longer helps? Old projects? Half-started ideas? Toxic relationships? You learn to ask, is this helping me move forward? And if not, you let it go. You don't need to carry every opinion, every fear, every possible path. You just need the one that's yours. And finding it means clearing the rest. You begin to love simplicity, not as minimalism for its own sake, but as clarity. You realize the fewer options you chase, the faster you move, the fewer distractions you tolerate, the more energy you conserve. And conserved energy is wealth. This is when your schedule tightens, not in a rigid way, but in a respectful one. You start protecting your time the way wealthy people do, not because you're better, but because your time is now tied to impact, and impact demands focus. You remove what drains. That one conversation you keep putting off, you finally close it. That task you keep moving to tomorrow, you either do it or delete it. You stop feeding loops that don't serve you. You close tabs in your browser, in your brain, in your life. You don't owe everyone access. You realize that being available to everyone leaves you available to no one, including yourself. So you begin to create space for deep work, for clear thinking, for silence. That's where your best decisions live. Noise isn't just external, it's internal too. The self-talk that spirals, the fear-based thoughts, the constant rechecking, those are patterns. And you now begin to disrupt them, not by fighting them, but by replacing them with new words, new thoughts, new actions. You start your mornings with clarity, maybe just 5 minutes to breathe, to move, to write. That's not self-care fluff. That's signal strengthening. That's you choosing to lead your mind before the world gets to it. You stop waiting until life slows down to focus. You create the conditions now. Even your space begins to change. You clean your desk. You organize your files. You delete the apps you know you scroll without purpose, not because you're trying to be perfect, but because you're done living in chaos and calling it freedom. You don't need more tools. You need fewer distractions. The best system is the one you'll actually use. So you simplify, you cut the complex and lean into the clear. And every time you do, your mind breathes a little easier. Your focus sharpens. Your results speed up. Because there's less in the way. You also get better at saying no, not rudely, just clearly. You don't need to explain every boundary. You just need to set it. You don't need to fix everything for everyone. You just need to own your lane and protect it. That's how leaders operate. And you're a leader now. Clearing the noise also means cleaning up your identity. The stories you've told yourself about being behind, about not being ready, about what success is supposed to look like, those get rewritten. You let go of comparison. You stop measuring your value by someone else's speed. You stop checking who's ahead or behind, because you're not in their race. You're on your path, and your pace is enough. You begin to notice how much energy you used to spend overthinking, second-guessing, scrolling, apologizing, explaining. You don't do that anymore. You move cleaner now, quieter, sharper, and you begin to trust. The more you remove what's not yours, the more clearly what is yours will arrive. You create margin, and in that margin, ideas land, solutions appear, people respond, because there's space now. No more signal interference, no more second guessing. This is where momentum multiplies, and this is the law. You cannot receive fully with cluttered hands, so you free them, you open them, and in doing so, you're ready for the next phase. Now that you've cleared the static, what you build next must be rooted in value. True, undeniable, earned value. That's the next law. Now that you've cleared the noise, it's time to focus your energy on the one thing that turns motion into meaning. Value. Not surface level value. Not imitation. Not trends. But true, undeniable value. The kind that makes people stop. Trust. and say yes. Value isn't what you say. It's what others feel when you show up. It's what you've earned through alignment, effort, and clarity. It's the result of doing the hard work when nobody was watching. The product of listening, learning, adjusting, and delivering over and over again. This law is simple. You get paid in proportion to the real value you bring. That means the marketplace doesn't reward noise. It rewards usefulness. It rewards precision. It rewards people who know what problem they solve and show up to solve it better than anyone else. So ask yourself now, what do I do that actually helps? Not what looks good, not what sounds smart, but what delivers. You begin to simplify your offer, your role, your actions, until they speak clearly. You're not trying to do 100 things. You're trying to do the right things, deeply and well. That's what builds trust. That's what builds brand. That's what builds wealth. You stop obsessing over tactics. You start doubling down on impact. Because you realize now, there is no shortcut around mastery. If you want to be paid more, valued more, trusted more, you have to be more useful. You learn how to solve real problems. You get obsessed with understanding your people, their fears, their needs, their struggles. You don't just sell to them, you serve them. You don't just speak, you connect. This is what separates those who fade from those who scale. It's not charisma, it's not luck, it's depth. The depth of your understanding, the depth of your delivery, the depth of your follow-through. You also stop hoarding your skills. You share, you teach, you give away pieces of your value, not because you're cheap, but because you're certain. You know that when people taste your value, they'll come back for more. Because what you offer is real. You create results, measurable, felt, repeatable results. And those results become your reputation. You don't need to shout. Your work speaks for you. And when that happens, opportunities find you faster than you can chase them. But building values isn't about perfection. It's about progression. You get better every week. You don't wait until something's flawless. You ship, you listen, you adjust, you show up again. That's how value is built. That's how skill becomes wealth. You also stop taking things personally. Feedback isn't an attack. It's information. You welcome it. Because every critique is a clue. Every mistake is a message. Every failure is feedback in disguise. You're not afraid to look again, to try again, to learn again. That's why your value grows faster than most. Because while others protect their pride, you protect your progress. And people notice. They feel your care in the small things, in how you write, how you respond, how you handle pressure. They feel the difference between someone who's trying to look good and someone who actually shows up with something good. You are that someone now. You've crossed the line between dabbling and delivering, between talking about potential and proving it. And once you do that, once you build undeniable value, everything else becomes easier. Pricing becomes easier. Positioning becomes easier. Partnerships become easier. Because people don't pay for noise. They pay for clarity and confidence. And you now give them both. You also value yourself more because you know the effort you've put in, you know the hours, you know the reps. And that confidence shows, not just in your voice, but in your posture and your proposals, your expectation. You stop undercharging. You stop apologizing. You stop second-guessing your worth because value is not what you hope you have. It's what you've built. And you've built it in full view of the hard days, the setbacks, the silence. You've stayed. You've shown up. You've refined. You've earned the right to rise. And now, with value in your hands and clarity in your voice, you're ready to move into the next law, the one that multiplies everything you've worked for. The law of investment. Now that you've built real value, earned, tested, and proven, you reach a new crossroad. You're no longer just building for survival. You're building for expansion. And that means you must understand the law of investment. Everything you want to grow requires energy, money, time, attention. The question is no longer should you invest, but where and how much, because what you feed expands, and what you avoid eventually shrinks. But here's the truth. Most people stop growing because they cling to what they've earned. They hoard, they save, they protect, and slowly, they stagnate. You won't? You've already learned to create value. Now, you learn to multiply it. That means reinvesting into what works, into your skills, your systems, your reach. It's not about spending for the sake of spending. It's about placing your energy where it returns with interest. You stop seeing money as something to keep. You start seeing it as a tool, neutral, powerful, and ready to be directed. Every dollar is a seed. The right seeds in the right soil at the right time. That's how you build momentum. You don't waste, but you don't wait either. You invest in learning because your mind is your highest ROI. You invest in tools, not because they're shiny, but because they help you scale. You invest in people because delegation creates expansion. And you invest in yourself because your growth drives everything. You stop asking, what's the cheapest way? And start asking, what's the smartest way? This shift alone changes everything. Because when you invest wisely, time bends in your favor. You stop doing everything alone. You stop making every decision from fear. You start seeing opportunity not as risk, but as leverage. And that's how the wealthy think. They understand that every meaningful return requires upfront cost. Not reckless, not blind, but committed. They know that sitting on value doesn't grow it. Only motion does. So you move. Even small investments shift your energy. They signal belief. They say, I'm serious, hey, not to the world, to yourself. Because the moment you spend with intention, you become someone who follows through. And that identity shift attracts acceleration. You also begin to notice what's no longer worth your time. What could be handed off? What could be automated? What could be optimized? That's not laziness. That's leadership. Because when you free your attention, you free your power, you stop being a worker in your own vision. You become the architect. You also build a relationship with risk, not thrill-seeking, not gambling, but calculated exposure to growth. You're no longer paralyzed by, what if it fails? You now ask, what if I never try? Because inaction has a cost too. And when you understand that, you start budgeting differently. You stop only tracking expenses. You start forecasting returns. You don't just spend, you strategize. This is what separates income from wealth. The ability to redirect energy with intention. You invest in your environment. You upgrade the room you work in, the people you surround yourself with, the content you consume. You know now, input shapes output. So you protect the pipeline. And you measure. Not every investment pays immediately. But you don't panic. You watch, you learn, you adapt. You don't chase dopamine, you chase results. And that makes you dangerous in the best way. You're building something now, not a side hustle, not a scattered dream, but a system, a life, a structure where value flows in and multiplies as it flows out. You think long-term now. You build with years in mind. You choose tools that scale. You choose moves that compound. You stop being seduced by fast wins and start planting foundations that don't crumble when the wind shifts. Because expansion is never accidental. it's engineered, and investment is the blueprint. And now that you understand this law, you begin to see your next move with new clarity, because the goal isn't just to grow, but to grow without losing yourself. And that brings us to your next law, the law of autonomy. You've built value. You've begun investing in what matters. Now you face one of the most critical thresholds on the wealth path, protecting your autonomy. Because without it, all your gains come with a leash. You didn't come this far to become someone else's tool. You didn't build discipline and value just to hand your freedom over to the next high-paying distraction. You're not for sale. You're building something too real to be rented out. Autonomy is your inner sovereignty. It's the ability to decide what you do, when you do it, and who you do it with. It's not about isolation. It's about choice. Without autonomy, your calendar is chaos. Your values bend to convenience. Your voice starts to echo someone else's agenda. And over time, you stop building your dream and start managing someone else's. Not anymore. From here on, your wealth must serve your life, not swallow it. So you begin to design that life, intentionally, fiercely, and without apology. It starts with ownership. You don't just earn money. You decide where it lives, what it builds, and who it empowers. You stop spending reactively. You stop chasing lifestyle as proof of success. You stop giving your time to anyone who pays without respecting your principles. You don't work to impress. You work to express. That's autonomy. You learn to say no, cleanly, kindly, without explaining, because every yes has a cost. Every commitment takes space. And you now see that protecting your energy is not selfish, it's strategic. You draw your line, not with fear, but with clarity. Not everyone will like it. Some will challenge it. Some will call it arrogance. But that's not your burden. Your job is not to be agreeable. It's to be anchored. You stop letting urgency hijack your peace. You stop letting opportunity override your values. You slow down to check, does this path lead to more control or less? Does this offer pull me toward my vision or away? You build filters, not just for people, but for projects, ideas, environments. You don't just ask, can I do this? You ask, should I? You don't just consider what it pays. You consider what it costs, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. This is what it means to be a sovereign builder. You move from reaction to design. You also protect your voice. In a world built on trends and clicks, you stop performing. You speak your truth, even if it's not the most popular. You don't dilute yourself to fit. You refine yourself to stand. That's what creates loyalty. That's what creates magnetism. That's what creates legacy. And legacy cannot be leased. Autonomy shows up in how you structure your time. You start building days around your peak energy. You stop waiting for permission to rest. You create your rhythm, and you honor it, not when it's convenient, but when it matters most. Because real power is not loud, it's quiet, it's decisive. You don't beg for balance. You build it. You make your non-negotiables visible. You calendar your peace, not just your hustle. You build buffers into your week. Space to breathe, to think, to be, not as a luxury, but as a requirement. You also start designing your business around your life, not the other way around. That's the shift. You're not just chasing scale, you're chasing sustainability. Because what's the point of growth if it cages you? What's the point of success if you're too burned out to enjoy it? This is what separates the wealthy from the busy, the fulfilled from the frantic. They both work, they both move, but one does it from freedom, the other from fear. You choose freedom, not because it's easy, but because it's right. For you. For the version of yourself that refuses to trade truth for applause, that refuses to exchange purpose for pressure, that refuses to build anything that demands your silence. This is your edge now. You don't just build money, you build life. And that life needs space. Space to create, to evolve, to rest, to lead. And now that you've earned autonomy, the next law teaches you how to face the force that either expands or limits every bold move. Risk. Now that you've claimed your autonomy, you arrive at a truth most never dared to confront. Every step forward carries risk. There's no growth without exposure, no breakthrough without vulnerability, and no reward without the possibility of loss. But here's the difference. You don't fear risk, you understand it. Risk isn't recklessness. Risk is calculated exposure to uncertainty with intent. It's the price of moving beyond average. The moment you step outside the predictable, you invite possibility. And possibility is where real wealth begins. People who stay safe never build anything remarkable. They protect their comfort. They play not to lose. But you've chosen a different path, one that requires courage, not just once, but again and again. You learn to see risk not as a threat, but as a tool. Because on the other side of uncertainty lives every opportunity that average minds avoid. The opportunity to lead, to scale, to stretch, to impact, to become. And no, not every risk pays. Some fail, some sting. But every single one teaches. Every risk taken with purpose gives you a data point, a scar, or a story. And all three are valuable. So how do you manage risk? You don't eliminate it until you navigate it. You start with awareness. You gather facts. You listen to your instincts, but also your numbers. You evaluate the downside honestly. Then ask, can I survive this? Can I learn from this? Will I grow regardless of the outcome? If the answer is yes, you go. And when fear rises, as it always will, you remind yourself, fear is information, not a command. It's your brain alerting you to uncertainty, not demanding you freeze. You feel it, but you don't obey it, because your vision is bigger than your nerves. You also stop chasing certainty. The world moves too fast for that. You embrace movement as the signal of life. You accept that progress means rebalancing constantly. That there's no safe point where risk disappears. Only moments where you grow strong enough to hold more of it. This is where your emotional fitness kicks in. You stop measuring success by comfort. You start measuring it by alignment. Does this move stretch me in the right direction? Does it teach me something I need to know? Does it bring me closer to who I said I wanted to be? You begin to take bolder swings, not randomly, but with strategy. You understand that the more responsibility you carry, the more risk you must tolerate. And rather than run from it, you prepare. You build buffers, you build skills, you build mindset, not as a safety net, but as a launch pad. Risk also shows up in relationships, in being honest, in saying no, in walking away from things that no longer match your values, even if they pay well. That's not foolish. That's freedom. And the more often you choose the risk that aligns with your principles, the more you trust yourself. Because self-trust is forged in the fire of decision, not in the comfort of theory. And you've now made enough bold moves to know you don't break easily. You bend, you adjust, you rebound. That's power. You also stop letting others project their fears onto you. You stop explaining your vision to people who don't build. You stop waiting for consensus before you leap. Because those who wait for everyone to approve, stay waiting. You now move with quiet conviction. And that conviction spreads. People around you begin to act braver too. Not because you tell them to, but because your presence models something rare. Courage with clarity. That's leadership. And risk, when approached with discipline, becomes a muscle. You train it, you expand it, you learn which risks are loud but empty, and which are quiet but rich with reward. You take the ones that matter, and you walk away from the ones that don't. You also learn to let go of outcomes, not carelessly, but with trust. You don't measure every move by how instantly it works. You measure it by how aligned it is with your deeper aim. Fine, you focus on being right in direction, not perfect in execution. That's the mindset that unlocks long-term reward. And you're not here for quick wins anymore. You're here to build wealth that lasts. And the only way to do that is to risk, not blindly, not carelessly, but boldly. And now, with this courage in your chest, you're ready for the next law. The law that transforms risk into resilience through reinvestment. Now that you understand risk, you've stepped into a higher league, a place where wealth isn't just created, it's multiplied. But here's where most people lose momentum. They taste reward, and they stop. They cash out too early. They grow comfortable. They think they've made it. And slowly, their edge dulls, their discipline fades, their momentum dies. You won't let that happen. You've earned your reward. Now it's time to reinvest it. Reinvestment is the act of taking your wins, your time, your money, your energy, and cycling them back into the system that created them. It's how you scale. It's how you rise beyond the level that comfort allows. And it begins with a question. What got me here? You identify the habits, the systems, the disciplines that fueled your growth, and you double down. Not just in quantity, but in quality. You improve the tools. You refine the process. You eliminate drag. And because reinvestment isn't just repetition, it's elevation. You look at what works and ask, how do I make this smoother, stronger, smarter? You reinvest in your mind through books, mentors, feedback, because the person who earned the last reward is not the same person who will earn the next one. Each level requires a new lens, a sharper frame, a broader view. You reinvest in your health, because what good is wealth if your body can't carry it? You fuel yourself to endure, to sustain, to stay sharp when the stakes rise. You reinvest in your brand, not just logos and slogans, but presence, clarity, and consistency. You stop blending, you start standing, because your message now matters more than ever. You reinvest in your network, upgrading rooms, tightening circles, elevating standards. You seek proximity to people who think bigger, execute cleaner, live bolder, because environment accelerates identity. You also reinvest your attention away from distractions toward creation. You don't need to consume more. You need to produce better. You stop scrolling, you start building, because what you make multiplies faster than what you watch, and you reinvest in your mission, the deeper why, the reason behind the money, because reinvestment without purpose becomes empty. But when the purpose is clear, every dollar, every decision, every direction becomes a step towards something bigger. You don't just upgrade your life. You upgrade your impact. You don't hoard money. You harness it. You don't fear spending. You direct it. You don't buy distraction. You fund expansion. You start seeing cash not as comfort, but as capacity. And here's the key. Reinvestment is not just financial. It's spiritual, mental, emotional. You pour back into the well that fed you. You protect your spirit. You guard your peace. You give yourself recovery, so you can return stronger. You also learn to delay gratification, Because short-term splurges steal long-term scaling. You can enjoy your wins, but you enjoy them wisely. Because you know the greatest luxury is not the thing, it's the freedom. And that freedom expands every time you reinvest. This is how you move from success to significance. You're no longer proving. You're no longer reacting. You're building a legacy. And it's not just for you. You begin to invest in others, in mentorship, in causes, in people who remind you of where you started, not to save them, but to lift them. You understand that wealth shared is not wealth lost. It's wealth amplified. And now, with reinvestment as your rhythm, you're ready to move into the next law, the one that gives you the most powerful edge in the modern world. Adaptation. Everything you've built so far, value, investment, autonomy, reinvestment, sets a powerful foundation, but none of it lasts if you can't do this one thing: adapt. The world shifts fast. Markets evolve, technology changes, people move on, and the difference between those who thrive and those who fade is not intelligence. It's adaptability. You're no longer just a builder. You're a navigator. And adaptation is your compass. To adapt doesn't mean to abandon what works. It means to stay aware, to notice patterns early, to stay curious instead of comfortable. It means you're not married to your methods. You're married to your mission. You hold the vision tight, but the strategy loose. Because you know now, success rewards those who don't flinch when the winds change, who don't cling to the way it's always been, who don't mistake a formula for a future. You let go of ego. You don't need to be right. You need to be effective. And that means you're willing to pivot, to upgrade, to let old tools die so better ones can emerge. You adapt your skills. You learn what the moment demands. You pick up new capabilities, not for show, but for service. Because when you adapt to the need, you become invaluable. You adapt your voice. You know how to speak to the world as it is, not as it was. You're not frozen in past relevance. You're fluid, responsive, alive to the conversation. You adapt your systems. What worked at 10 clients breaks at 100. What worked with one team fails with 3. You simplify, you automate, you delegate, you evolve how you operate, so you can keep scaling without breaking. You also adapt emotionally. You learn to detach from outcomes, to absorb shock without spiraling, to face surprises with composure. This is adaptation of the soul, emotional flexibility in the face of uncertainty. You become water. You don't resist the current. You learn to ride it. You let the turbulence sharpen your instincts. You let discomfort grow your range. Because every time you adapt, you expand. You also stay humble. You don't assume you've figured it out. You ask questions. You run tests. You treat success as a snapshot, not a guarantee. Because the minute you think you've made it, you stop looking. And when you stop looking, you stop leading. Adaptation keeps you relevant. It keeps you close to the truth. It keeps you open to change, not because you're uncertain, but because you're aware. And awareness is your new wealth. You no longer resist change. You study it. You learn from competitors, from outliers, from failure itself. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. You just need to know when the road has changed. That's how you win longer. Because every industry has graveyards of the brilliant who refuse to evolve. You don't want to be remembered. You want to be remembering, staying awake, staying nimble, staying sharp. You adapt your beliefs too. You drop the ones that no longer serve you. You stop saying, "That's just how I am." You start asking, "Who do I need to become next?" Because growth isn't just about adding, it's about shedding. You don't get stuck in identity. You stay anchored in purpose. You shift, stretch, grow, and transform. Always in motion, but always in alignment. That's real power. That's the strength behind wealth that lasts. You also recognize when to reinvent. Not everything can be adapted. Some things must be rebuilt, and you don't fear that. You know now. Burning down what no longer serves makes space for something better. This is how you go from being good at something to being legendary, not by locking in, but by loosening up, not by clinging, but by flowing. And now that you've embraced the art of adaptation, you're ready for the next law, the one that multiplies your reach, and not through solo strength, but through connection, alliance. You've learned how to adapt, flexible, clear, and forward-moving. Now, you face a turning point. No one builds anything great alone. Every vision that scales, every movement that lasts, every legacy that matters is backed by alliances. You don't need to do everything yourself. In fact, if you're still trying, you're playing too small. You're operating like a solo warrior when you're meant to lead an army. And building alliances isn't weakness, it's leverage. This is where you start thinking in networks, not silos. You begin by identifying the people who don't just add energy, but multiply it. You look for those who share your values, complement your skills, and move with urgency. You don't chase clout, you align with capacity, because when you surround yourself with people who elevate you, your speed doubles, your clarity sharpens, your blind spots shrink, and suddenly, your world becomes bigger. You don't need hundreds. You need alignment. One strong alliance can do more than 10 empty contacts. You stop trying to impress strangers. You start forging trust with the few who matter. And it begins with how you show up. You lead with value. You don't just ask. You give. You look for what others need and offer it freely. Not to manipulate, but to serve. Because when you lead with generosity, the right people lean in. You also drop the ego. You stop pretending you know it all. And you ask questions. You admit what you're still learning. Because humility builds bridges and arrogance burns them. You start listening more. You let your allies shape your thinking. You collaborate not for control, but for creation. Because you know, two aligned minds don't add, they exponentiate. You build alliances with mentors, with clients, with teammates, with peers. You're no longer trying to carry the weight of your mission alone. You're assembling a structure that supports it. And you protect those relationships. You communicate clearly. You over-deliver. You show up when it's inconvenient, because loyalty isn't built when things are easy. It's proven when they're hard. You also learn how to exit gracefully. Not every connection deserves longevity. Some outgrow you. Some resist growth. And that's okay. You don't burn down the bridge. You simply stop crossing it. You walk forward with respect, not resentment. You also understand boundaries. Alliances don't mean losing yourself. They mean extending yourself with intention. You stay rooted, you stay honest, and you protect your core, even while you expand your reach. You stop trying to do business with everyone. You start doing business with the right ones, the ones who see your vision before it's visible, the ones who challenge your comfort without attacking your worth, the ones who add fuel without adding noise. You start seeing the compound power of trust. One introduction, one shared project, one honest collaboration can unlock doors you couldn't force open alone. You're no longer networking for contacts. You're building foundations for movements. You also remember to be that person for others, to support someone's work without asking for credit, to recommend someone's name when they're not in the room, to mentor someone who reminds you of your younger self. Because legacy is not just about what you build, it's about who you lift. And when alliances become your normal, when connection becomes your strategy, you stop struggling in silence. You rise together. That's wealth. Not just in money, but in momentum, support, reputation, and reach. You become part of a living ecosystem of growth, and when one wins, everyone wins. Now that you've embraced the law of alliances, you're ready for one of the final and most personal laws, the law of self-mastery. You've built alliances, you've leveraged systems, you've grown beyond solo effort, but now you return to the one domain where all wealth begins and ends, yourself. Because external success will always mirror internal structure. This is the law of self-mastery. Not control through force, but clarity through discipline. Not perfection, but ownership. It's the art of being the same person in every room, in every season, no matter the pressure. Mastery doesn't mean rigidity. It means integrity. You're not flawless, but you are aligned. And in this alignment, you become powerful. You no longer get thrown by every setback. You don't spiral from every delay. You don't outsource your mood to outcomes. You learn to stand steady, eyes forward, grounded in purpose. This is not about hustle. This is about habit. Because the version of you that reaches the highest levels does boring things well. They wake up on time. They protect their mind. They finish what they start. They keep promises to themselves, even when no one's watching. Especially when no one's watching. That's self-respect in action. You now treat your attention as sacred. You guard your mornings. You command your evenings. You don't scroll to escape. You sit with yourself, and in the silence, you sharpen. You master your reactions. Not by bottling emotions, but by pausing, by asking better questions, by seeing the difference between an impulse and a principle. You don't suppress, you choose. This is how real leaders lead, not by being the loudest, but by being the most centered. You study your patterns. You catch your triggers. You take ownership without shame. Because self-mastery doesn't mean avoiding mistakes. It means responding with growth instead of guilt. You also set standards for how you speak, how you show up, how you make decisions. You stop outsourcing those standards to culture or convenience. You define them and live by them. This gives you a strange kind of peace. Because now, even on the hardest days, you don't feel lost. You might feel tired, but not unanchored. You might feel challenged, but not confused. You know who you are. You know what you're about. And that knowing is priceless. You also master your energy. You understand that you're not a machine. You need recovery. You need rhythm. You design your days to honor both drive and rest. Because fatigue makes fools of the best minds. And you didn't come this far to burn out. You also master your ambition, not by shrinking it, but by directing it. You stop chasing everything. You start choosing one thing and pursuing it deeply. That's how momentum builds, not in speed, but in focus. You stop being addicted to progress and start becoming devoted to presence. Because mastery lives in the moment, in the breath before the answer, in the pause before the reaction, in the decision to respond instead of react. You also practice humility, not false modesty, true humility. The kind that stays open, the kind that's not threatened by new ideas, the kind that seeks feedback, not flattery. Because when you master the self, ego becomes a servant, not the king. This is how you rise quietly, without needing to post it, without needing applause. You know what you're building, and that's enough. But here's the secret. Self-mastery isn't a destination. It's a daily return, a choice, over and over, to stay awake, to stay intentional, to stay honest. And when that becomes your rhythm, you unlock something few ever touch. Sustainable wealth, not just money, but clarity, peace, direction, and the internal force to keep going. Even when no one claps, now, with self-mastery in place. You're ready for the final law, one that fuels every step, every season, every evolution. Pursue the next level of knowing. Self-mastery grounds you. It gives you control, clarity, and peace. But mastery without curiosity becomes stagnation. That's why the final law of money is not about arrival. It's about what comes after. It's the pursuit of continued knowledge. Because wealth is not a static condition. It's a living practice. And the moment you believe you've learned enough, you begin to fall behind. You stay sharp by staying a student. You don't stop learning because you've made money. You keep learning so you can multiply, adapt, and endure. You don't just gather facts. You seek insight. You don't just collect ideas. You ask better questions. This is a shift in identity. You move from the one who knows to the one who seeks. And seeking is power. Because the world doesn't reward the person who was right 5 years ago. It rewards the person who stays relevant today. You read, you listen, you observe, you challenge your own assumptions. You stop defending what worked before and start exploring what might work next. You don't chase novelty, you chase understanding. You go deeper, into yourself, into your craft, into your market, into your mission. Because surface knowledge creates noise, deep knowledge creates clarity. You stay close to truth, and truth evolves. What you believed about money 2 years ago may not serve you now. What you assumed about people or value or strategy may have shifted. You allow that shift. You stay open. You stay teachable. This doesn't make you uncertain. It makes you agile. The wisest people aren't the ones who shout. They're the ones who listen longer, who observe more closely, who let time refine their opinions. You study success, not to copy it, but to understand its patterns. You extract principles. You notice timing. You study failure too, not to fear it, but to build resistance. You develop mental range, the ability to hold conflicting ideas, to sit with complexity, to remain calm when others panic. That's the edge. Because most people crumble when clarity fades. You grow stronger. You also seek feedback, not praise. You invite perspective. You welcome hard questions. You stop defending your position and start refining your lens. Now that's how empires grow. On truth, not ego. You never assume the room owes you respect. You earn it daily through attention, through humility, through learning what others miss. And that's where you separate. You stay current. You stay adaptable. You know when to upgrade your knowledge, and you do it with speed. No, you also explore new domains. Not because you need more distractions, but because you understand. Wealth loves cross-pollination. Ideas from one field spark breakthroughs in another. A lesson from biology might shift your thinking on marketing. A story from history might reshape how you lead. You don't box yourself in. You stay curious. Not just about work, but about life, about people, about patterns, about the forces that move the world. Because the more you know, the more you see. And when you see more clearly, you decide more powerfully. You speak more precisely. You act with conviction, not guesswork. You begin to preempt change. You're no longer just reacting. You're anticipating. You sense waves before they crash. You position early. You move faster because your insight leads your action. And when you live like that, wealth becomes a byproduct of perception. Knowledge becomes your quiet weapon. Not just what you know, but how you integrate it, how you apply it, how you embody it. And so, you return each day, not to a finish line, but to a question. What do I still need to learn? You don't fear what you don't know. You embrace it, you chase it, you grow with it. And this is how wealth stays alive, because you stay alive, awake, learning, evolving. You've now climbed every inner rung. From inner force to outer wealth to the path of continual pursuit. There's no more next chapter. There's only the next decision. You've learned the laws. Now, the only question that remains is, will you live them? You've reached to the end of this journey, but not the end of your growth. Because this wasn't just a book, it was a mirror showing you what you've always known deep down, that wealth doesn't begin in your bank account. It begins in your beliefs, in your discipline, in the daily choices no one sees. You now carry the 19 laws, not as rules to memorize, but as tools to live. They are yours, not borrowed, not theoretical. Yours. You've seen that money doesn't respond to wishful thinking. It responds to alignment between what you value and how you act. It flows toward clarity, toward structure, toward the inner order you've been building all along. The journey wasn't about tips or tactics. It was about transformation, about becoming the kind of person who attracts, holds, and multiplies wealth. Because it's no longer something you chase. It's something you embody. You've built yourself from the inside out, quietly, consistently, with intention. And now, you move differently, speak differently, think differently. Not louder, but more grounded. Not faster, but more deliberate. Not needing permission, but leading with vision. Because you're no longer just surviving, you're building. And every law you've absorbed here is a signal to the world and to yourself that you're not here to play small. You're here to lead a life of abundance by law. So return to these pages whenever the noise gets loud. Revisit the rhythm, re-anchor to the truth, and then act. You've already started. Wish you can do it soon.